good afternoon, good morning, and welcome everyone to our webinar series. So today's topic is all about our desktop app, and we're really excited to introduce to you our newest way to access data. I'll start by introducing our team today. We have Eli Chadwick here, who is our sales engineer. Eli will be giving us a tour of the platform today and the app. We also have Jonathan Ball, our product manager online. Jonathan will be available through the whole recording, the whole webinar on the chat. So if you have any questions, please jump on there and Jonathan will be available to answer those. Anything we don't get to, we will follow up with you later, so please don't be shy. So for context, Koordinates Cloud is the main site where our users currently access data and where our publishers and customers load up their data into the cloud. Last month, we showed you the QGIS plugin, and that was really about showing how easy it is to access coordinates data in QGIS. But this month, we want to show you our new desktop app because this is finally released. It's in public beta now, and this opens up the functionality of Kart for all users. And if you don't know what Kart is, you'll learn soon. Otherwise, it's just about showing you how easy it is to use and configure coordinates data on your desktop. So it's really for those users who want to curate their favorite data sets and watch for updates. I really want to highlight that this is a public beta. So this is the start of us opening up the Kart functionality, which we hope to teach you a bit more about in this webinar. There is access only functionality now, which means that you can take the data off coordinates and down onto your local environment. But data collaboration, where you can have editing permissions and share between your teams, that will be coming in the app along the line. So this is really the start of that journey where we've got the app created, we've got some key Kart functionality, and we're releasing it into the wild, and you're the first people we're showing. So yeah, as a beta program, we would like your feedback, so please do get in touch if you have anything about that. So yeah, the main thing I wanted to also just highlight about Kart is this means that you can see the history and get the changes instead of a complete data set. So it's really about configuring and keeping your data sets that you require all the time up to date. We put more power in the user's hands with this app, and it is really easy to have all the exploration you already get on using the coordinate sites, but you can do that with the app and a whole bunch more. So again, please fire through any questions you have on the Q&A window. Jonathan will be around for those. And on that note, I will hand over to Eli to give us a tour.
Cool, thank you, Anne. I'll just start with mindful that you may have seen the other webinars. There could be people in the room that did not see them. And so I'm just going to give you some context around how Koordinates works. Basically what it is, and explain how Kart fits into the system, and then we'll get into the app after that. So this slide really is just to give you an overview of the Koordinates ecosystem. We're in the middle here, coordinates.com. That's like a umbrella site. Underneath it are a bunch of different publishers. If you wanted to take out your own business plan with Koordinates, you get your own white label data portal. That has your own theming, your own URL. You can use your custom domain, and it essentially is going to look like a site that's run entirely by yourselves. You can load your data up there. I won't go through that in depth in this particular webinar, but suffice to say, there are techniques for managing your data in the cloud, loading your data in the cloud. You can upload data, you can ingest it from various different data sources. Everything I'm about to do is API first, so it's all scriptable yourselves. Over on the left, we've got a subset of our users that have their own white labeled portals. They push their data up to Koordinates, and then Koordinates feeds it out to the end users in a bunch of different ways. There's tons of different use cases that people have these days with GIS data. Probably the most typical one is people want to find a layer, download it, and then pull it into their GIS and do their thing with it. Other users might just want to access the data by service, and for that we provide OGC web services, WMTS for tile services, and WFS for feature services. And then there's a bunch of other different things in the cloud, which I'd encourage you to check out one of the other webinars, which show you more about how to load data up and how to pull data off. Down here, we've got this Kart. Kart is a wrapper around Git, and I'll explain how that works in the next couple of slides. So one of our major missions is, we know there's a lot of GIS data sitting around siloed on people's file servers in Dropbox. And the problem we see people having a lot is, how do they distribute that data to the end users? So given that what we're talking about here really is, you've got a bunch of different data. We support lines, polygons, point clouds, points, grids, and tables. So vector, raster, point cloud. And the plan is, you take out a portal site, you load your data into Koordinates, and then we've got a number of different methods for getting the data out to your end users. So we've got the portal site. People can come to your site, they can discover the layers that they're interested in, and then they can download those in the format that they require with the projection that they need. And they've now got that data local. The desktop app, which is the subject of this webinar, is another method for accessing data. Important to point out, there is no licensing associated with the desktop app, and is going to shortly take you through how to go about installing it. So the kind of picture here is that you've got a coordinate site, you've loaded your data in it, and your users can come along, download the desktop app, and from their desktop, they can access all the data that you've loaded into your site. We also have a plugin for QGIS, which allows you to have the full data browser experience from within QGIS. The UIs are really similar between the portal, the desktop app, and the QGIS plugin. So it means that your end users really only have to learn one method of interacting with the data. Then they can use all of these different tools, and then APIs. For the more programmatic approach, you may want to build an application, use Koordinates as a GIS server, and consume the layers straight into an app, which you would do via one of our APIs. Now, this slide's more about distributed version control. So the data is all sitting in Koordinates. As I mentioned earlier, Kart is a wrapper around Git. So if you're familiar with Git and GitHub, essentially you can do all the same things that you do in Git with Kart. What we've done is extended Git so that it understands geospatial data, and it's a method for tracking change across multiple edits. So it gives you an auditable history of all the work that's gone into a data set, and it does enable this multiple collaboration on one source of truth. So what we have here is, we've got these repositories. A repository is basically like a folder. It's like a Git folder, and in it will sit your database, your data set. You may have uploaded the data as a shapefile, a file geodatabase, any of these other different types of formats. What we do is we load that into a Postgres database. We have a bunch of services running off that. We also mirror that into these Git repositories. So these are represented in the middle here. Think of Koordinates as GitHub, if you like. So all of the data that's gone into Koordinates is sitting in these repositories. Your end users can come along, find the data that they're interested in, do a clone or a get of the data that's going to pull that repository down to their local environment. And from there, they can do a bunch of updates and edits on it, roll those into a commit, and then they can push that back up to the parent repository that sits in Koordinates. What this fundamentally enables is, you may have end users, some of them are in QGIS, some of them are in ArcPro, Global Mapper, a bunch of different tools which they do their edits on the geospatial data. It means that they can all collaborate on one data set without needing to make copies, zip them up and put them onto a Dropbox type distribution network. Then you end up with this quite messy history of, you might just call it backup 1, backup 2, whatever you do. This means that you'll have the data sitting in one authoritative place, and your users can access that, and they can also benefit from any updates that have come from either the publishers or other people that have access to push their data into that repository. The easiest way to show you here is if I get out of here, and let's go into coordinates.com. So this is the umbrella site that I was talking about. If I click on the data button, it takes me into Koordinates. This has data from all of the different publishers across the entire Koordinates ecosystem. All I really wanted to show you in here was the concept that you can go searching for some data. So I can do a keyword search in here. I'm going to play with a power lines data set today, mainly because it's nice and lightweight and works well on Zoom. But for your purposes, imagine that you can do all of the things I'm about to do with your own data sets. I've got a bunch of filters down here, so I can filter by the region, I can filter by the data type, I can say only show me vector, raster, or grid data. We also have facilities for storing tables, sets, repositories, which are Kart repositories, or documents. So you can use your coordinate site sort of like a SharePoint for GIS data, if you like, and put a number of different data types up there. It gives you the major advantage of when you do find the layer that you're interested in, you can see it. So this is the layer I'm going to do some work on. We call this a data sheet. I can see who the original publisher was, a bunch of metrics around it. I can add that to the map on the right here. And from there, I can, from a nav perspective, I can close in and out of data view here, and I can go into a map only view there. So I can close that down. We can drag these around. Now that I've got the data in here, I can do a number of different things with it. It's going into a map viewer. I could add a number of different layers to it. I'm just going to focus on this one here today. I can do spatial queries. So I can say, tell me about, for instance, this line, and that'll show me all the attributes from the map viewer. I can do things like slide the visibility around. I can zoom to the extents of the layer. I can reopen that data sheet so I can look at the metadata around the layer. I can say, I want to look at the data table in its entirety. So from here, I can see all of the features that are in it. And probably the main function here is that I can do an export. So from here, we have you can choose to crop it down to your area of interest, or you can remove the crop altogether. As you reduce the size, the download size will also reduce. You can reproject it into any projection that makes sense for the area that you're in. And you can choose a number of different formats. So Esri shapefiles, Esri file geodatabases, map info tabs, and MIFs. That's going to be a CSV, which will slot into anything. It's going to have a well-known text attribute holding the geometry in it. So it allows for you to truly talk to any GIS system fundamentally. I'm going to stick with GeoPackage. That is the core of the Kart system. And then from here, I can say, let's do an export. It's going to set me up with a URL once it's done the so in the back end, it's essentially pulling the data out, writing it to the format that I have selected, and then once that is finished, I'll get given a link and I can download the data. That should be done in a second. The big difference here between the app is once you do your export, that export is now separated from the system, if you like. So if there were changes made to the underlying data set, you won't know about it. You'd have to come along and do another download. So I can do my download. That's fairly quick. And that's going to give me a zip file. In the zip, I've got the data in a GeoPackage in the CRS that I had prescribed. And I can now do whatever it is that I'd like to do with that data set. Now I'll stop sharing and pass it over to Anne, who can introduce you to the method for installing the app.
Oh, thank you. I'll share my screen there. So this is the coordinate site that Eli has just shown you. As you can see, I'm logged in here. I want to have a look. This is our marketing site, but if I jump in here, I can start using the platform. As you can see, I've got a couple of map viewers where I've been working on different areas. We've got some imagery there. I've got a 3D viewer here. But now I want to get the app. So I hit that button and I'm able to download. I work on a Mac, so I can hit this install here. So we hit this. Excellent. Continue, install. There we go. It wants to download. We're going to say okay, and let it write files. And as I was saying before, because we're releasing this as a public beta and everyone's going to be downloading this on different machines, feedback is welcome so that we can make sure we can configure it to suit everybody's environment. if possible. Of course, there's firewall issues and a whole bunch of things that come into play with an app, but yeah, the point is we've made it as easy as possible with this installer to actually get it on your machine. And likewise for Windows. Eli, you've downloaded it on Windows because that's what you work on, and it's the same with the installer here, is it?
Yeah, virtually the same. I'll just get I think it's an exe, and
Yeah.
run that, and up she pops.
Oh, excellent. So yeah, while that's running, I'll take the time to just show you our 3D map viewer, which came out last week, which I think is pretty cool. So you can go to 3D, and it doesn't host 3D data, but it shows all the 2D data there in 3D. You just use that to pan and zoom over. Okay, it sounds like that's downloaded. So there, installation was successful. I'm going to close that. Do I want to move it to bin? Move to bin. Close down my zoom there. And then if I go to my launch pad, my app will open. There we go.
Yeah.
This is it. So I just had a holding screen for a second there, and then it opens, and as you can see, it's got my map viewer that I was just looking at it before. So it's got all these things that I was working on in my browser, but it's kept all my settings and brought them down into my app. So I'll stop sharing at that point.
Right, so that's coordinates.com. Before I jump into the app, this is a demo site, which I'm going to be using a little bit. What I think is quite interesting is this is the demo site, and this is the app. If I drill down into my demo site, it becomes debatable whether you can even tell the difference, to be honest. So I can tell this is the app, but the UI is exactly the same. I was mentioning earlier that once you know one, you know the other. So this is the app, and if I go back to the website, that's the website. So really, really similar. Users can hit the ground running and know both systems pretty much straight away. So before we get into what I'm going to do here is take you through all of the different things that the app can do. From a nav perspective, I've got local repos, which I can toggle on and off. This shows me any repositories that I have already pulled down. So there's a lot of different words for pulling down. You can clone it, get it. So this is the get. If I wanted to do a get on that, just simply click that and the cloning process will start off. We've also got the map viewer. The map viewer follows your coordinates ID around. So if you configure one up in the cloud, you'll have access to it, as Anne was just showing you in her application. Some users might use this just to view data. That might be as far as they need to go. And then we've got in the middle here, the data browser. We've got the same filters, region, data type, all of those things. And over here, repos. I'll show you what a repo looks like, just so that you can understand what we're talking about here. So then my documents, coordinates, this is where I put my repositories. This is a New Zealand address file that I've cloned down, I believe, a while ago. Inside of the repository, you have the interesting thing in here is you've got your geo package. If I open that up, I can start using that data as is. If I go back into the application, I can click on this card and it takes me into the contents of the repository. This is quite a large data set. Will take a minute to load. So what we have here is these are branches. Down here, you can create new branches. I'll do that in a sec. You can say check. So if I click that, it'll go back to Coordinate Server and see whether your site has any updates. In this case, we have an update. So I can apply that update. That green box is an update that has not been applied to my local data set yet. So in this middle column, this is a timeline of all the commits that have happened to this data set back to its original July 18, 2021. I can actually roll my working copy back to any of these different points and view the data at that state. So what's happened here is the publisher has pushed another update. They do it on almost like a weekly frequency. Each week we get a different commit. I can go back and look at any of these commits from the past, and that will load it into my diff map and my diff table. and I can see what happened. So this is where you get that auditable trail of all the things that have happened. When you save a commit, you get to put a message in. So you could put a message that related back to some other system, and it gives you a fully auditable history of every data set. In this diff map, the green points are going to be inserts, the yellows are modifications, and the reds are deletes. And I can peruse the table and go to any of the different particular points and view what happened at that point. So here I can see this particular record was deleted. So if I just zip back up to the top here, I've got this update. So if I zoom back a bit conceptually, you've got a site, you're loading data into it, you maybe do it on some frequency, send an update back up to the site. Your end users have this app running, and any of the repos that they've cloned down will get a notification here, demarked by this green one. That basically means there is an update. I would like to install that. So now we just click apply updates, and that is going to take those updates and apply it to your working copy. You could also script this. It's pretty much from a command line perspective, Kart pull, and that will pull any updates into your local system. Then once it's pulled those down, it will just basically assimilate that into your data set, and you are synchronized. So one of the big things that we see people doing with our platform is they might come along each week and download an entire data set. We think this is a better method. You don't have to pull down a lot of these data sets are gigabytes in size, if not larger. All I did then was basically pull down, a couple of thousand features. I didn't have to pull down the whole millions of them. So it's a much more atomic, and if it doesn't work, you don't have to roll back or anything. You just simply reapply it. So much simpler way of doing things with a visual display. So now what I want to do is I'm going to grab that same power line set that I was looking at earlier. So I can choose between going to the entire coordinates data index, or I can go just to my site. In this case, I want to get some power lines data. And so that's going to search for all the different data sets that are up on our site. And here is the layer that I was looking at earlier. I can click the data card, same UI that I was just looking at up on the website. It gives me all the information about the metadata, version control, a data sample. There's a bunch of different things in here, which I'm not going to drill into too much, but it shows you the repository history. It's going to show you the history. This is where we do change sets. That's probably a subject for another day, but essentially you can create a change set, choose the period that you want to grab, and then pull that down and apply that to your local data set. Probably more work than just doing a apply updates using Kart. I can also add this layer to my map from here, or I can go ahead and do my get, which is what I'm planning on doing here. The spatial filter deserves some explanation. This is not a crop. This is a spatial filter. The difference being when I filter down to a certain part of the country, I can say, I only want, say, that area there. It means that I can pull just a subset of the data down and work on that. And then if I was collaborating, I can still push that back to the master data set. It means that you can have a really massive layer sitting there, and you could have different people working on it, and they don't have to pull the whole thing down if they're only working on their own regional piece of data. I'll remove that for now because it's a small data set. Another couple of things you can do, I can change the location where I'm going to save this clone to. I'll just stick with the defaults for now. And then there are more options under the more options. So from here, I can do it. I can look at the different services that are hanging off this layer. Maybe I don't want to download the layer. Maybe I just want to access it by WFS. I can go into export. And from here, I can download the data set in much the same way that I was doing from the site that I was just on. I can reproject it. I can pick a different format and then hit create export, which will pull that data set down. But what I really want to do is a get, because we're cloning. So yeah, I'm going to remove the spatial filter and I'm going to say get. And I can even see that I just downloaded this layer from a site earlier, and I could download it again if I want. So you've got a history of all of your interactions with either the app or the site. I'll get rid of that guy and we'll just let that clone down. And you don't have to hang around there. I've got a little progress monitor up here that's going to just tick away, doing its cloning. So it looks like it's completed. Over here, I can verify that I've now got a local repository. If I go back into my repos collection, I've got the power line sitting in here, and inside there will be a geo package. So that's all now sitting on my local system. One thing I wanted to show you real quick is it is possible to, if I open up a command line prompt here, so this is now everything I've been doing through a graphic user interface. You can do the same thing through a command line. The main reason I wanted to do this is that line I've put in, Kart reset, discard changes, that'll roll my local geo package back to the last commit. The reason I wanted to do that is because now if I go back into the app and open up the power lines, what I've essentially done is trick the system into thinking that I'm one commit behind. So what I can do now is, the assumption here is that I would have, it looks like I've cloned this a while ago, so a month or so, or 2 weeks ago. And what the system is saying again is, hey, there's an update there. Would you like to install it? So I can say, yes, apply the updates, and that'll grab the update and reinstall it. You wouldn't usually do that, but if you wanted to roll back to a different point in time, you can roll back to any of these points in time. So if I go back to one of these old commits, like this one, I can grab this unique identifier and I can do a Kart reset back to that commit, and that'll roll my working copy back to that point in time. So what are we going to do with this data set? I am going to make a few edits to it, show you how you would go about committing an edit, and then we're going to push that up to my demo site. To do that, I'm going to open up QGIS, and I've got this project here that's pointed to the location of the data set that I just cloned down. So here we have the power lines data set. That's just a contextual base map in the background so that we can see where I'm talking about. I'm going to make an edit in here. Again, you're thinking in terms of, you've got a site, your user has come along, they want to add their information to it and then push it back up to your site. So to do that, I'm going to put this layer into edit mode. I'm going to add a pipeline between the two islands, and I'll make it zigzaggy. And I save that. So what that's done is that has added the new pipe to my local working copy, and I'd like to save that. So now that I've saved it, I can go back into the app, and the way that it works under the hood, much the same as Git, Kart is continuously monitoring the geo package. Anytime you add data to it, it knows about it, and it says, would you like to add this to the history of the repository, which I would like to do. And I'll call that an inter-island pipe and say commit. And let that commit. And then once it's into the actual timeline of the version history, I can then push this around the place, and that is a permanent fixture in the history of the data set. So now I can see my inter-island pipe is in there, and it's part of the repository. The other thing I wanted to show you is that there is the option here of creating a new branch. So a branch isn't a copy of the data set, it's a view into the data set. So you're not making more data, you're simply saying, I'm going to branch off, and then you can merge that back in at a later date. So I'll call this inserts. I'm using the main branch. I say create, and that creates a new branch called inserts. So this repo that I've cloned down has come from Land Information. I don't have any access to send data to them. What I can do is add a new remote. So this is that demo site that I was just showing you earlier. I'm going to push this repository up. I'm going to make the owning group spatial and say add remote. So what this is doing now is it is going to send the repository in its entirety up to the demo site that I was just talking about. Once it's up there, any other users can see it and pull it down, and that's where you get your collaboration thing happening. So that has been successful, and it has now changed me over to the inserts. So I'm going to do a push. And that'll send the data up to the coordinate site. So now that we're on the inserts branch, which is what I wanted to do, what happens on Zoom is sometimes there's competition for resources. It usually just immediately switches over to it. In this case, it hadn't. So now that I'm on the inserts branch, if I come in here and let's add something else. Let's do something up here, like I'm going to run a new pipe around the mountain. And I'll save that. Go back into the app. I can see that I've got a new edit in here. If I click on it, this is going to be the new changes that I've made. And I'll call it mountain line. Importantly, that change has been made on the inserts branch. So if I was to, once that's been saved, if I was to swap back to the main branch doesn't know anything about the work that was going on the inserts branch. If I go back into QGIS and if I refresh my view, you'll see that that has all gone. That's because it exists in the inserts branch. So really, it's just, what I really want to show you is that there is a workflow which allows you to do all your edits in a branch. And then once you're happy with the changes that you've made, you can come in here and say, I want to merge that branch and merge any changes that have happened over on inserts. Before you do the merge, this is where you do any conflict resolution. If there was any, this is a new feature, so there won't be. I hadn't filled out the support information, but in any case, I can do a merge. So that's now merged it into main. If I go back to QGIS and refresh my view here, I can see that I've got the work that was done on the mountain, and I'll also have the work that was done between the two islands down there. So now that I go back into the app, I can see the two changes that I've made have been pulled into the main branch. I can do a push, and that is going to push my main branch up to my site, where it'll be stored with the full version history of the changes that have happened. So I'll just give that a sec to do its thing. Right, that looks like it's gone. So now if I go back up to, this is the demo site. If I go into the back end of it, I should find that I've got a new repository sitting here that's been pushed up. Bearing in mind that is a repository, not a published layer. You can publish a layer off this repository. To do that, you would go into data sources and you would look for the spatial entry here. And then I find the layer that I put in there. I've got the branches, and I can publish a layer off either of these branches. So if I go into main, select the layer, do an import, without really having, you can fill in all of this information now or later, and then hit import. And that kicks off the process of doing the import. So now what you've got is a repository, and you've got a layer published off it. This is an area that we're doing a bunch of working on at the moment. It is about to change a wee bit. You will be able to clone a published layer, make edits to the backing repo, and you won't need to do this step. But this is how it works right now. But there's going to be some major advancements in this area. If I go back into the data browser and I do a sort by recently added, and then I do a filter by repositories, what I want to look at is the repo that I just pushed up. Here is the repo that I pushed up. If I click on it, I can see that I've got the edits, I've got the branches, and I've got the full history of all the things that have happened to it in here. And then meanwhile, the manage, this will probably take longer than we've got left, but just to explain the way that that's what's happening there is I've pushed a repository out, got the repo here. Repos are going to sit under repositories. I've then published a layer using that repository as a data source, and that is publishing here, which shouldn't take too long, but there it is. It's starting to come through now. So I can see the extents have come through, and it's pretty much just finishing off the publishing process. I think that's just about everything I wanted to show you today. Suffice to say, yeah, so essentially you've got, your users have the app, they can clone layers down, they can just use them locally. If the publisher updates anything, then they can benefit from those updates. And it's a really easy way to distribute your data to your users without them having to come to the website. The experience is virtually the same. The big difference is from the app, you can use this cloning ability, which has many advantages. So I guess at that point, I'll pass it over to Jonathan.
All right, thanks very much, Eli. That was an excellent demo. In all honesty, there has been no questions. So I've been having a very relaxing 45 minutes watching the presentation myself. I thought maybe two things I could point out just in my own words. One is reiterating a point you've made a few times, and another is a new concept. But first of all, this idea of cloning is really quite new to geospatial, but I think it's really important, and I guess Koordinates is betting pretty big on it. But I think in a few years, the idea of downloading data and taking data off a site, disconnecting it from the authoritative publisher, and breaking that link is going to seem really, really backwards. What cloning does, maintaining that link to an authoritative data set, it's really powerful. And it means that if you're doing important work that you need to be able to go back to time and time again, that link to the authoritative data set, whether it's a government data set or something that multiple people are working on through your business, that link will remain active forever. And as that data set evolves, grows, or is just updated, your local version is right there with it. It's one click away from being entirely up to date. So cloning is a really powerful idea, and I think it's going to become quite popular in the near future. The other thing I just wanted to point out, it's more to do with Kart than cloning specifically, but when we're looking at the branch information, like if you could open the New Zealand addresses card, when you're looking at a data set in this sort of view, to me, this is really data governance come to life. A lot of you, I believe, are probably from larger organizations or government departments, so you'll probably spend a bit of time talking about data governance. This is it in action, being able to see every transaction made on a data set, go back through its history, identify any errors, and have a full auditable history of the data set. So it's really a powerful idea and something you don't see everywhere. I think that's really all I have to point out. Thanks again for the demo, Eli.
All good.
Cool. Well, thanks, Eli and Jonathan, for leading us through that. And thanks to everybody who has joined us today. We really appreciate your time. We will send out a recording of this following up in the next week or so. Yeah, so as you saw today, there are many ways that this was really primarily about this new app that we've released as public beta. And with a Koordinates cloud site of your own, you can deliver data directly to your users using this app. Also, it's available now for public data that is on the site. If you are interested in a discussion about your needs, please do get in touch with me and we can set up a call to discuss your needs. So yeah, I hope everyone goes and has a wonderful day out there. So thank you. See ya.
Bye.
Cheers.